Hey, you guys. Thanks for sticking around. We just are both scrambling, and it's been a busy morning. I've been up since 6 doing stuff, and here we are. Seems like half the day has been already gone by. Productively, though, I might add. So good to see you guys from wherever in the world you are tuning in, and I always love to see that. So if you would drop in the chat, I see a bunch of you guys right here. So let's see who's here. Hello from India. Wow, awesome. And Penelope, good that you're right down the street from me practically. And Batarag in sunny Birmingham. I've been to Birmingham. Who else is there? Jared. Hey, Jared in Chicagoland. So good to see you guys. And Digital Nomad from Laos. Wow, the Mekong River. Dang. We got people all over the world. This is so awesome. And we've got one of our favorite guests joining us in a minute, Dotan Saguy. I will give him a proper introduction, and we'll basically be talking about street photography and answer your guys' questions. But let me get my official start going here with you guys, if you don't mind. I'm Marc Silber. I'm a photographer, author. You can see one of my books right here, Carmel, California. And I love bringing you guys amazing photographers, amazing creatives to help you with your own skill set, your own game. That's the whole point of why it's called Advancing Your Photography. And the show is brought to us by our good friends at Bay Photo. They make prints. You need to make prints no matter what. Always print your stuff. Don't just leave it on your computer. That's one of my pet peeves is, with the digital world and with social media, we forget that the whole basis of photography is making prints. So here's some specials they've got. 20% off on fine art canvas wraps. I've actually made those. They're pretty cool. And you can see they just kind of float off your wall, which is a neat look. 20% off. There's the link for it. And acrylic prints are also 20% off. These are cool things. But if you want to get something else, you're always going to get 25% off on your first order. Order something. Make a print. You could put it on a mug. You can make a big print and put it on your wall. You can make a notebook out of it. You can make cards and send them off. I got a card from Rachel, basically showing off her photography. And, that's a great way to promote your work. Make physical cards and hand address them to your prospective clients or your clients. It's really, really a good thing, you guys, because it's you, it's your art, it's your handwriting. It's a good way to go. All right, so hop on over to Bay Photo Lab later on in the show, or actually after the show, if you don't mind. Okay, so our guest today, again...
before we do that, we should make sure that they also know.
Thank you, Jared. Yes. Will you guys subscribe and enable the bell? You can see I have a green screen here. I have no idea why it's showing up without the big sir in the background, but I'm going to play that again. Just remember to subscribe and enable the bell because you don't want to miss any of our episodes coming up, okay? Yes,
and like
Jared.
the video because that will help other people see the stream. So we would really appreciate it if you like the video as well.
It's true, when YouTube sees a lot of likes going on, it says, hey, this must be a good thing. Well, we know it's a good thing, but you guys can help us with this. Okay, our guest, again, is Dotan Saguy. He was born in Israel, grew up in Paris, immigrated to New York City in the mid-90s, and he's been living in Los Angeles for nearly 20 years. You have seen him here before. He's an amazing street photographer. He decided to focus on photography after a successful career in high tech. Pretty cool. It's like me. This is not my first career. And since then, his photographs have been published by many major publications, including Leica. I love Leica. I love it dearly. And I saw that he was featured as an artist. He's published 2 books. And he's done an amazing thing with his street photography. So let's welcome Dotan. Dotan, great to have you with us again.
Thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure to be with you.
We're going to have some fun, aren't we? So, listen,
Yes.
this came up because I have a class that I teach called AYP Plus, which is separate. It's just like you have your master class. And what we're doing this month, and we did it through May, and we decided to expand it through the whole of the summer, is everybody's picking their own projects and we're critiquing them every week. So we're seeing those projects unfold. And maybe we'll talk about that too, the importance of having a project. It makes a big
Yeah,
difference than a one-off photograph, right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think it makes a difference at so many levels, from being motivated to being focused on something and knowing, what to go after when you're out there, to being able to publish it, because projects are much easier to publish than single photographs, and to, making a book. I mean, there's so many things you can do with projects you can't do if you're just shooting single photographs. So
It's
I'm a
really
huge,
true.
yeah, I'm a huge
Yeah.
fan.
And it's one of the liabilities of our, digital social media age is we tend to just see these, bam, one photograph,
Right,
and you're not seeing the consecutive story,
right.
which is the heart of photography, right? I mean, this is
Absolutely.
this
Yeah,
is it.
yeah. Yeah, this is storytelling and everything, happens with projects mainly. I mean, you can tell a story in a photograph, but it's limited what you can do there. And
Yeah,
yeah, and I think it also separates, like anybody can, get lucky with a photograph at some point, and have, a nice photo that they take, and they're proud of. And I think it's great to have, to start with one or two that you're really proud of. But, that's really what separates, serious photographers from, people who, just sporadically photograph, is the consistency and being able to output, those great photographs one after the other. And a
yeah.
project really helps with that.
Yeah, and you have, if you're following a project, you don't feel like photographing that day, too bad.
Right.
It's like, do it. If it's raining and the weather's really bad, so what? Do it. It's like
It will give you a
that's
different look. Right.
it'll give you a
Exactly.
different look. Anyway, we're following our projects through in AYP Plus. And by the way, if you guys aren't in that class, you should be. This is like deep a much deeper experience than you're ever going to find on YouTube, because we're doing it via Zoom, and we can turn on your microphone and we look at your work. Jared will stick the link in there. But this has come up, Dotan, like, okay, how do street photography? The first question, how do you, what's your, maybe just unfold it. Like, what's your general approach to a street
Well,
shoot? Maybe, kind of unpack it from,
yeah, and so as you mentioned, this is something I teach in my street master class. But the thing that I think, there's this, myth or sort of romantic idea about street photography, that, you pick up your camera, you go down the stairs or whatever, and you're in the street, at whatever time is convenient for you, and you start taking photos, and it'll be great.
yeah.
Um, and there's so many things that are wrong about that. I mean, it can be a nice experience. I'm not saying it won't be pleasurable, but in terms of, actually getting results, I think that's where the disconnect is. A lot of people feel like, oh, I'm getting to use my gear, and I love, I love using my camera, and feeling free in the street to pick out, things that I notice. But from that to actually making photographs that stop people in their tracks and really, connect with people, I think that's where it's hard to make the connection. And so what I recommend my students do, which is for most of the people who join the class, it's a complete departure from the way that they're used to shooting.
Yeah.
What I recommend that they do is really to have a game plan, and to approach it much more strategically than that. To me, it doesn't detract from the, sense of freedom and the joy of photographing. On the contrary, it really puts you on the mission, which, I think is very, satisfying, and
Yeah.
it gets you result. too, and there's a feedback loop there. Once you start coming back with results, and you're even more motivated, and you want to pursue a project, and it's this virtuous circle that starts kicking in. So what I mean, let me kind of unpack, I guess, what I mean by
Yeah.
game plan, because there's multiple things that are tied to that game plan. The first one that I often talk about is to be very conscious of, you're shooting street photography for the moments and the things that are happening in the street, and you, in order to get that, to have the opportunity to witness those moments, you want to be strategic about where you go, first of all, and when you go to those places.
Yeah.
And so, you can't expect to, like if I went shooting around my neighborhood right now, the best, moment I might be able to catch is somebody walking their dog and looking at their phone. Like it's not gonna
That's
be
not
that
super exciting.
great.
Yeah.
No, and so I have to be a little more strategic about, well, maybe I need to schedule my shoot for, I personally, the place I love to shoot when I'm in LA is in Venice, as Venice Beach, as many of you know. And the Venice Beach, it depends, there's a lot happening there, but there's more happening on weekends,
Yeah.
and there's more happening during summer, spring, summer, fall. Winter gets a little more dry in terms of moments and everything. So I'm always thinking about where in Venice I go and when I go. And in fact, I even have it down to a science where before going, I always look at there's a webcam. There's actually several webcams that look onto Venice Beach on the boardwalk.
Uh-huh.
And before leaving my house, I will go online, check out the webcam, and see just how much foot traffic there is right now.
Oh, that's
And
smart.
I won't go until the foot traffic has picked up, because I know that's when I'm going to get, the best results. So that's the first part of that game plan that I'm talking about, is being strategic about where and when to go, down to, making a little systems for,
Yeah.
for you to know, when and where is the right place and time.
By
Yeah.
the way, I just wanted to mention,
Yeah.
if you want to share any of your photographs while we're talking, I
Oh,
think we can hook you up there.
let me
Um,
see if I,
if,
how would that work? So hold on. I
so
can,
Jared can basically, I think if you open up, like if you even have them in preview,
It
um,
depends on if he has the right. What internet browser are you using?
using
I
Chrome
am
or
on Safari, I think,
oh
right
yeah,
Yeah,
now.
so he won't be able to.
unfortunately it only works.
Um,
That's cool. But we actually have some of your photos we'll put in here a little bit later.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. So the
No, no.
game plan, no, the game plan is super important because you're absolutely right. If it's just like, hey, I'm going to wing it and this is going to, that's not how you write a story. You
Right.
don't wing it with a story. You put an outline there. When I write a book, first thing I do is I write my table of contents so I know exactly where I'm going with this thing.
Right.
And it's the
Right.
same, you're basically saying the same thing, right? You have a direct plan to follow. It's not this sort of mystical, whoa, I hope everything goes right.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about specifically having a picture in mind or a situation in mind, because you can never. That's the part that's really fun, is you never know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and you want you. I would say it's actually best not to count on anything, or to anticipate a certain picture that you want to take. Or I think you should have total creative freedom at that point, once you're in that moment that you put yourself where it's going to be busy and it's the right time and the right place.
Yeah.
The things that I do like to have a game plan about, though, is not so much having in my mind which photo I'm going to take, because that never works, but more so having a plan for, first of all, my camera settings. I have sort of default settings. No, I'm not talking about just the menus. I'm talking about like actual, like aperture and focus distance. And
Right.
I know the type of photos, and this is very personal, the type of photos I tend to make. I am best off if I'm shooting a manual camera, so I have my camera on aperture priority, because I don't really need to control the speed.
I
I
hear
have
you.
have it set where it's not going to go down further than 250th of a second or so.
Yeah.
so that there's no motion blur or camera shake. And I always set my exposure setting to underexpose by 2/3 of a stop because I don't want to lose the highlights. I have a
Mm-hmm.
camera where if you lose the highlights, they're gone because I'm shooting in native black and white. So if it's white, there's no detail in there and it's not recoverable in post. So I always underexpose everything a little bit.
Yep.
And, and then the third thing I do is I set my focus. I have manual focus camera, so I set my lens to focus at about 10 feet, 3 meters, just
Okay.
around there, because that's typically, and I'm at f8, aperture 8, so
Yeah.
it's a very, flexible, as long as my subject is within like, I don't know, 5, 6 feet to pretty much almost infinity, it will be in focus.
Right.
So, and this is designed so that if I walk into that street, so in my case on the boardwalk in Venice, and all of a sudden something happens within the right, the distance that I typically shoot at, all I have to do is press the shutter. I have nothing else to do. I
Yeah.
mean, I just frame it, press the shutter, or try to frame it the best I can, press the shutter, and if there's, something really quick that happens, I can catch it. Somebody passing on a skateboard with, pulled by a dog, or, any of these things, I can very quickly get it.
A woman with a big snake around her neck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't have to start thinking about, oh my God, should I put it on manual mode? And if so, like,
Oh,
what's the right
please.
speed? Like, I don't have any of that. I can just focus on what moment is happening and just framing it, clicking the shutter. That's all I have to think about. So having that, again, it's part of the game plan, starting out with something. Then I can adjust it. I can say, oh, there's this subject. It's not quite, it's a little closer than what I'm usually shooting. So I'm going to adjust my focusing distance, or I don't want as much depth of field. So I'm going to adjust my aperture slightly. So I can make those adjustments, but I have a starting point that I always know that my camera is set at when I start out. And I always come back. If I shoot a scene, I always come back to, okay, do I have it on f8, 10 feet, underexposed 2/3 of a stop, aperture priority? Like my camera's always there, and I know I can rely on the next time something happens. I don't have to think, is it in the right mode? No, it's always in that mode. And so that's part of the game plan.
You guys listen to this. This is really like this is what I consider a really important point with advancing your photography. Bob Holmes says, do not let the camera get in your way. And
Right.
unfortunately, there's a lot of misadvice out there. Like, you should only shoot in manual mode and blah, blah, blah. That's such BS because it will get in your way. You're going to miss shots when you're fiddling with your camera.
That's exactly
Instead of
right.
having the camera be a tool that you use to capture that creativity. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, the camera to me has what I love about the way I shoot with this camera and the way the camera operates is that, and I shoot like as you've probably figured out by now and from Marc's intro, but it's the camera is not there. It's basically just me and the subject, and the camera is a complete afterthought. It becomes transparent. It kind of erases itself, and I think that's the best thing the camera can do for you. It really shouldn't be this thing that you're focused on, because if you're focused on the camera, you're not focused on what's happening and capturing what's happening.
And I think your subject perceives that as well. If
Oh yeah,
if they see you doing this chimping kind of thing and you're fiddling, it sets off a little bit of an alarm, like, what's this guy doing, right?
right,
And
right.
instead of
Yeah.
like, there's another person. In fact, this will be my next question of how you approach people. But we want to disarm anybody getting like, oh, well, who's this dude with the camera and what's he doing with it? And So
Right.
that is my next. Oh, sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No, I think I see where you're going. The approaching strangers is always challenging because we're wired in our DNA to be afraid of strangers. Like
Yeah.
if it used to be that you would approach somebody and they would like chase you with a with some kind of weapon, and so you'd have to like run for your life, and that happened for hundreds of thousands of years. So we're wired for that, and so it's hard to get over it. But one of the things that makes it easier to approach people is when you project confidence. That
Yes.
you know what you like about, like, what attracts you to them in terms of what you find interesting about them, and you can express that to them in a confident way. I love your hat. I love the way your glasses look. I love your outfit. I love your dog. And you can say it in a heartfelt manner that is completely, that comes through as genuine and really empathetic and connects with them. And then part of it, as you mentioned, is being confident about your equipment and having the equipment not be in the way of your relationship with the person. And that makes it a lot easier to photograph them that way.
I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind. I've done
Yeah, no,
this
go
with.
for it.
eh,
Yeah,
Let's just do like a role play here. Let's just say I'm a guy here. I'm here in Big Sur,
yeah.
and I'm minding my own business, and you want to photograph me. So let's see what you do here.
Yeah, I would say, hi. My name is Dotan. I'm a photographer. I
Ooh.
love your. I would probably not start with that. I would say I love your hat.
Oh, thank you.
Love this
Yes.
hat.
Designed by
Um,
Carlos Santana, by the way. Isn't that
that's
amazing?
amazing. I love Santana. I love his
Yeah.
music. And so we might start, a small conversation about music and Santana and hats or whatever. And then I would
Yeah.
say, Mark, I'm actually here. I'm doing a project about Carmel and people who live there. You look like you fit right in, with your hat, that relaxed look and everything. And I love the background behind you. Would you? I know you're fishing right now. I don't want to bother you, but would you mind if I took a few pictures with you in the foreground and your dog over here? And just don't mind me. I'm just
Yeah.
taking candid photos, so
Sure.
you don't have to worry about the camera or myself. Just continue doing what you're doing. I just want to make sure it's okay with you, and I'm happy to share the pictures with you when I'm done.
Oh, well, that would be really cool. I'd love to see them. Yeah, sure. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm just fishing,
So
and I got my dog and my skateboard, and
exactly. So don't mind me. I might take a little while because I'm waiting for the right things to pop up in the background, and I'm
okay.
also waiting for maybe some people to pass by. So I might be here for a little while, but I'm not going to be in your way. Yeah, and just don't mind me. So that's basically how I would approach it, and the people typically. They like the attention. They love, when you give them compliments, and they love
Yeah.
it even more when you can share the photos with them, or
Yeah.
there's that promise of getting the photos. So it's very rare that somebody will, refuse. It happens. I'm not going to lie to you, and it's part of it's part of the job. Like, there's some people who just don't want to be photographed or don't want to be bothered, and in that case, I just thank them and I go away. I'm not going to insist. I'm not going to try to sneak into the corner, and try to get them in the frame anyway. Like, I just go away and there's other fishes in the sea.
Yeah, I think
So
that's great. Do you ever do it like almost like sign language without verbal? Like, let's say if somebody's
yeah,
far away, you know.
yeah. So it depends. I mean, if there's a scene that's happening and it's already well in progress, like I don't know, somebody's skateboarding with their bulldog on top of the skateboard, and like, it's already happening. I'm not going to start my whole dialogue there because
Yeah.
I'm going to mess up the scene, and I'm going to get in their way. In that case, I might just say, hey, is it okay, like, kind of like, just hand gesture, and they might just nod, and that might be enough to go with it. And then
Yeah.
you then what I'd do is I would try to like follow them for a while, and maybe every now and then sort of get the verbal, not the verbal, this kind of a sign for them that it's
Yeah.
still okay to be there. So, and sometimes you get that permission either verbally or by sign, and then at some point, um, the person says, "Okay, thank you," and meaning like, "Go away now. I've had enough." Politely, usually. I mean, almost every time when they want me to go away, it's just very subtle, and so I'm attuned to it, and I'll say, "Okay, no problem. I'll share the photos with you. Bye."
That's
But
good.
if they don't do that, I think a lot of people assume that people have had enough of them and they want them gone. So they take a photo that they think might be okay, and they say, "Okay, I think I got it. Bye," and they go away. And I think that's a huge mistake, because especially if it's a good scene, something, and it's something that is hard to get, like something very, in motion with, where a lot of moving pieces, like somebody with a dog on a skateboard, that kind of thing, where it's just
Yeah.
hard to follow them and frame the shot and get the right background. I will stay on that for as long as I can run behind them or in front of them. Like I will not, or unless they tell me to go away. But I will stay with the scene for as long as the scene is going on, because you never know when you have it. Like, there's no way. Everything's moving too fast. And the worst feeling is when you're reviewing your photos in Lightroom and you're like, no, that's almost, no, that's not
Just
quite that
didn't
one.
make it, right?
This one would have been perfect, but there's a post coming out of his head. This one has a slight blur, from the shake of the camera. I guess I missed it. I guess I almost had it in that one, and that one, but I don't really have the shot.
That is really, you know what? That's really, really good advice. And probably my most common critique point is just that. Like, hey, you were in a beautiful, perfect setting. Everything was set, the
Right.
framing, the light, but nothing happened.
Right.
And if you just waited, somebody would have walked into the frame, or they would have turned their head and there would be something interesting. But we don't want to be impatient as photographers. We have to wait and like as Ed Kashi said, you have to let the magic unfold.
Right.
And what you're saying, this is super good advice.
Thank you.
It's this instant world that we're in. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I learned the hard way, getting, the almost, and then figuring out, you know what, I will stay until that's my motto, is I will stay until the scene no longer exists, like the people have gone away, or whatever made the scene interesting has gone away, or people tell me to leave. There is no other way I will go away. The scene might unfold over a whole hour. I will be there if it's worth it. Like, I'm not saying if it's just like somebody looking at their phone or whatever, I'm not going to stay for that. But if it's a scene where I'm like, oh my God, there's two, this woman playing with a snake and her 5-year-old son, like that's a scene that I shot that made it into the book. I will stay. I stayed for almost an hour during that scene, and the only reason I left is because the snakes went away. The guy who owned the snake came and picked up his snakes.
I remember you told us that, yeah.
But that was like 50 or so minutes later. I know, because of the timestamp on the camera, on the shot. So
yeah,
I will stay for as long as the scene is going on, if it's a good scene, unless I'm told to go away.
Brilliant. You guys, this is really, really good stuff, because this is the real deal here. We're going to take up some questions in a second. Cartier-Bresson, I heard, didn't do what you said. Apparently, I heard he was just surreptitiously in there, and he was out of there before the person even noticed him, which I find surprising. I don't know that that's 100% true, because many of his photographs, he had to be so close up that they had to have seen him. So I'm not sure if I totally buy that. I could see it in some occasions, but I think there must have been some connection there. I'm just looking at the photograph. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think there may be a little bit of exaggeration. There's also the fact that he was shooting with a 50 millimeter as opposed to, I shoot with a 35, so he didn't have to get quite as close. It's also a different style. Like, I adore his photography. That's been a huge inspiration for me, obviously, but I personally like to get in closer. I like to have more of a, see the scene unfold and try to capture multiple moments during that scene. So I have a different approach, and I think everybody needs to have, develop the approach that's right for them. But for me, I'm very much of a scene-oriented photographer. I have shot, several, photos that I'm proud of that were, one shot kind of things, where I saw something, I shot it, maybe it took a couple of shots and then went away. So that happens. I'm not saying that never happens, but the most productive way, my biggest output is from shooting scenes that are developing, where I can have multiple moments in that scene, by far.
Yeah. So we're going to take some questions, but I have my own question here. So you're coaching. You've got a master class, and by the way, we'll make sure we get the link in there. Do you
Yeah, and
have?
I got a coupon for them also. If
Oh,
I
nice.
think the coupon from last time still works, so it's a 20% off, and it's AYP 20.
Oh, nice. Okay,
In
so
my,
Jared will
yeah,
get that in there.
yeah,
You're coaching people who undoubtedly have some stage fright, right? They
absolutely.
are timid about this to begin with. How do you coach them into getting over that, and getting out there
I,
and doing what
look,
you're talking about?
I can totally empathize with them because I'm not a real people's person myself. Like I'm more of an introvert. I'm much more comfortable behind the camera than in front of it. I'm not really the kind of person who's like outgoing on the street, who will approach people. But the camera, I mean, the just photography pushes me into doing that because I know this is how I'm gonna get the best results. If I don't have to make contact with them, I won't. There's some
Yeah,
photos I know I can grab without, asking for permission or connecting with them, either because it's somebody who's knows they're going to be photographed. I don't know, somebody like in a costume, parading through the street and so on. That's the kind of person, they're there to be seen and photographed, and I don't have to really, to be too careful in that situation. But in other situations, with more private situations and so on, I know that's the best, that's the most productive way. So I would say, if you're yourself shy and you don't, kind of dare approaching people, I would say try one thing just to start. You don't even need to photograph them afterwards, but try to go up to people and give them a compliment about something that you feel is what, draws your attention to them.
yeah.
Again, it's either great hat or this or that. You don't even need to photograph them after that. Just see how they react, and they might give you a thank you, and then you can, if you don't feel comfortable yet, you don't have to photograph them. You can just move on. But at least you'll have done the first step of giving them that compliment and seeing how they react to it. I would say that's a great way to just get started.
Just get started with it. It's a surprising amount of photography doesn't have anything to do with the camera. It has to do with communication. Whether
Absolutely.
you're doing portraiture or, I mean, the only time maybe that isn't an issue is when you're just doing pure landscapes. But anytime you're dealing with people or
Right.
animals for that matter, and it is really an important skill. I should actually offer a class. I mean, because communication is the skill behind all this. That if you have
Right.
it, you're going to get a result. If you don't, you're not, right? It's that simple.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's take
Yeah.
up some. Sorry,
Uh,
go ahead. But I was going to say we'll
no.
take up some questions here.
Oh, go for it. Yeah. Yeah. Let's take some questions.
Jared, you want to start rolling them out here?
Yeah, we've got a couple good questions here, and I'm actually going to
Let's.
combine two of them together because they kind of lean into each other.
Okay.
So first, we have Digital Nomad asking, "Do you do much post processing with your black and white images from a monochrome sensor? Silver X Pro used a lot." And then we also have another question, which is very similar. Sadaket, who thank you for your super chat. We really appreciate your support. So just wanted to thank you for that. But they were asking, I have a Leica Q2 monochrome, and I still feel the need for Silver X, Silver FX sometimes. What's your monochrome workflow? So I thought those were two similar
Yeah.
questions we could put together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thank you. Those are great questions. Um, the files that come out of the monochrome are by no means finished. Like
Yeah.
I don't, I the beauty of those cameras, of the sensors built into those cameras, whether that's the M10 monochrome or the Q2 monochrome or any of the past monochromes. Also, there's two other versions of the monochrome that were prior to the M10 monochrome, which I also shot. Um, the files are not meant to be finished. It's not because it's been shot on that sensor that it's a masterpiece coming out of the camera. I mean, I'm not even talking about how, what the subject matter is and so on. I'm just talking about technically the file. If it's properly exposed, it doesn't mean it's finished by any means. The power of the monochrome sensor that Leica has is the malleability or the flexibility of the file. It's the dynamic range that it can render. It's how much depth you have in the shadows. It's all those subtleties in the grays. All that stuff is packed into that file, but you still have to exploit it to
Yeah.
make full use of it. And the file is not finished when it comes out, when it's on the card, by any means. It's just that it rendered a file that is now ready for like for a real workout. You can give that file a real workout, and it will stretch to the whatever you want to make it look like. That's the power of those files.
Just like a negative coming out of a camera.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah, exactly.
It's not ready to be just printed and given away. It's like
Exactly.
you have to process it.
Yeah, exactly. But by that monochrome sensor, what you have is great black and white film.
Yeah.
That's exactly the analogy. But that doesn't mean that you're not gonna, I guess back in the film days, what we would do is we would put it in the enlarger, and we would print, make a beautiful print with it, which meant Ansel Adams would dodge and burn for weeks.
Totally.
That was most of his work, was that darkroom work. And I think the same applies for monochrome files. You take them, you can use them in, you can, whatever your weapon of choice is, if you like Photoshop or Lightroom, or if you like Lightroom plus Silver Effects. Personally, since I know that was part of the question, I start in Lightroom with very few little things. I might do in the develop module. I might. I'm actually in there right now. I might tweak the exposure slightly. I might lower the highlights very slightly to make sure I'm not clipping any highlights, and then I'll throw it in Silver Effects and work on it from there. So that's just my workflow. But I think the pictures that come out of those cameras oftentimes really need more than you can't just throw them onto start sharing them and everything right out of the camera. I don't think that does them a service. I think you can take them a lot further than that.
If you guys have been reading my book, you know that processing is its own stage in the cycle of photography, and you never skip over that. Even whatever camera you're using, an iPhone or whatever, you always process your images. I can't imagine a perfect photograph coming out of any camera. Right. So that's really an important thing. We had one question about your master class. Are the students in your master class geographically from all over the world in the U.S., or do you conduct it as a Zoom?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way the master class works is actually, I made it for kind of initially it was because the pandemic was starting and people wanted to keep learning. Yeah. And so I made so most of it is a pre-recorded class. There's 5 modules that span all the different areas of street photography. So it's very comprehensive, and there's exercises and assignments and everything built into that. But it's a self-serve kind of thing. Cool. What I add on top of it to add more interactivity to it is that every Thursday I have a office hours where people can log into Zoom and I answer questions. So once a week, basically, people study on their own and do the assignments on their own, but once a week we connect and they can ask questions. We can talk about anything really. It's for an hour. We're on Zoom together, and there's usually anywhere from 4 or 5 to 15 people, and it's always always very interesting. But so it's that mix of the interactive office hours and the pre-recorded class, which gives people the flexibility.
And you guys can see the link in there. You'll get 10% off. Jared, do we have any other questions before we wrap up?
Yes, we got a couple questions. We've got a few quick questions. Here's one from John over in the UK. What's the longest term project you have completed or are in the process of completing?
Oh wow. That's a great question. I don't know if the longest, I guess the longest so far was the Venice Beach project, which was shot over 3 years or so. But I don't know that the length, I published my second book about a family who lives in a school bus, and that took me about 10 months because that's the time that they were in LA that I could photograph them. So I decided to end the project when they left town, and I had enough material to make a book. But I'm starting a couple of projects where I don't know, they might take me a year, they might take me 6 months, they might take me 3 years, and I'm never sure when I start a project how long it will be, but it's kind of I would say the right length sort of reveals itself as
Yeah.
you shoot the project, and you kind of get a feeling at some point that okay, it's done. I don't have that much more to say, and I should wrap it up. That sort of thing.
It's really I think that's the way it is with every creative process. When you're writing a book, there's a point where you end off. And maybe you're going to write a second book, or, in this case, you're publishing your books with different stories in them. I think that's really good advice. Longer, but it's more than a month, let's say, or a week or two or whatever. I mean, you might have an experience where you're going somewhere and you're going to be completely immersed, and bam, 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 you're going to photograph a lot. But you're developing your projects over a period of time because that's when it's unfolding, or what it sounds like.
The other thing is, frankly, when I get into a project, I get into a project because it's fun and interesting, and I'm fascinated by the topic at hand, and I have something to say about it, and I am not eager for it to end.
Yeah.
It might sound, it sounds counterintuitive when you think of like work, because, when you think work, you think, I want to be done with it. I want to complete something and be done with it. But if you're really having fun and you're really into it, like right now I'm doing this project. It's kind of a silly project. It's another take on the Venice boardwalk, which is all about dogs. So I have this project about the dogs of Venice, which is kind of ironic because it used to be called Dogtown, not because of dogs. It was just
Dogtown, yeah, the Z Boys in Dogtown, right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm making right now I'm making the literal Dogtown, and I love dogs and I love Venice Beach, and I have so much fun going out there and just finding quirky situations with dogs, which that I'll be sad when that project is over. So I've been shooting that. Well, I'm using photos that I've shot 5-6 years ago, so I don't know that it counts that I started the project 5-6 years ago, because I didn't really have a dog project back then in mind. But
Right.
as a dogs in Venice project, I've probably been shooting it for about a year. And my publisher asked me, like, so when do you want to do the dog book? And I was like, I don't know yet. I have lots of material. I probably have about 200 keepers by now, like 200 photos that will go into the edit, out of which we'll pick like 60 for the book or something. So I could, theoretically, I could tell the publisher, let's do the book. I have enough to make a good book with, but I'm not feeling it. I'm like, I
Not
feel like
there
I have
yet.
more. Yeah, I'm enjoying it too much, so I'm probably gonna let it, run for another year. By then, I might have another 200 photos on top, so I'll be doing my edit out of 400 photos, which will make a stronger book,
Yeah.
ultimately. And so that's I'd
Okay,
say
cool.
have fun first. Don't
Well,
think
here,
too. Yeah.
don't rush through, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the
Here's
journey
one
that
last
matters.
question. So, how do you generate your project ideas?
Oh my God, that's a really
I mean, that comes up in our class too, because everybody has to pick their own project.
so
And yeah,
I'll tell you a story rather than trying to. I guess that will sort of answer the question. I would say that if I had one word, it's curiosity. Uh, when I'm curious about something, that usually what leads to a project idea. I'm spending a lot of time in Mammoth Lakes these days because I have a place there, and I live about half time there. And I've been looking for things to document near Mammoth, but I'm not really into landscape that much, and I'm not really into wildlife photography, which is what most photographers do over there. And so I went to visit a few places where I thought maybe there could be projects, and one of them is this ghost town of Bodie,
yeah,
California, which is located about an hour northeast of Mammoth. And I stumbled, I kind of went there as a tourist first. I was like, I'm not sure there's anything there, but I'm gonna check it out. And people say it's interesting, and I've seen photos, and it's pretty, and So I went and I even took my dog with me because I was like, worst case it's a dog. It's a good dog walk.
Yeah.
And I let myself, um, free of any preconceptions. Like I entered that historic park with just complete open mind about what might or might not be a project there. And I just was really like, I felt emotionally just drawn to it. Like just kind of like how I felt the first time I was in Venice. I felt like, oh my God, I just want to be here and take photos. This is like, I would just so enjoy doing a project here, but what would I do? Because there's no people other than the tourists and the rangers, and it's a ghost town. I mean, it's like, what are you, what kind of life can there be in the ghost town by definition?
Yeah, really.
So I started thinking about like what interest in, like, just more I guess philosophically or spiritually, what drew me to the place. And it turns out, after reading a little bit about it and everything, what really fascinated me was that the fact that they had stopped time. There was this direction from the state park, the California state parks, when they took over Bodie in 1962. They said, we want to preserve it in a state of arrested decay, which essentially means we want to stop time. We want to do everything in our power to stop time and preserve it the way we found it for generations to come. Which, you're talking about very fragile wood structures in a very unforgiving, it's 8,500 feet with rough winters, harsh summers. Like, how do you stop time in decay in those situations? So that's the idea that my train of thought, as I was processing what I was seeing and what I was learning. And then what I decided to do was, which I might very well pursue. I'm in the process of getting the right authorizations for that and everything. But I was wondering, how do they do it? How do you stop time?
Interesting. Wow.
And
Good point.
so I went to the California state parks and asked, I'm now going through the management, and the people who manage that, the rangers, and asked through the chain of command, essentially, like, how can I be there as a documentary photographer, documenting how rangers do this on a day-to-day basis over the course of a year, because it's the seasonality there is part of the story. It's like covered in snow in the winter. You can only access it through snowmobile, and it's quite a place. So anyway, so that might become a project very soon. But I know that's a very long-winded way of answering that question. But it was just curiosity, essentially, that from one thing to the other kind of led me into making it into a project, or conceptualizing it into a project.
It sounds like a combination of curiosity and also something that gets your own mojo. It has to have something to it. There's a passion about it that you want to stick with a story that long. And there's that combination.
Right. And I think the one mistake that a lot of people make is that, oh my God, Bodhi's been photographed so much, all I see on Instagram is Bodhi. Or Venice is photographed so much, oh my God, there's nothing else to, why would I photograph there if everybody else is photographing there? And I think that's a huge mistake, because individually you might have something to say to the conversation that nobody has said before about this place, or a way to shoot it that's different from what people have done before. And it's and it's a subject obviously other people are already interested in. So to the extent you can find something to add to the conversation, it's a conversation that's already happening. It's much easier to engage people into a conversation that's already happening than a new conversation that nobody has ever talked about before.
Boom. And I love that. No, I mean, that's great. Because that is a myth-busting point of like, well, everybody's already done everything. And it's almost drives you into apathy, which don't do that as a creative. You have your own unique voice. What if the Beatles had said, oh, look, there's been other foursomes and, harmonies. We don't have anything new to add to this thing. I mean, no. We all have a voice, and our storytelling is going to be different than anybody else's. Dotan, any final little piece of advice you'd like to leave these guys with in terms of street photography?
Oh God. Well, I could, you know me, I could be going on for hours. So I know we have a time frame to stick to. I mean, if you're interested in learning more, but again, I've got this masterclass is very
Check it
comprehensive.
out, you
I'm
guys.
I'm very method based. So it's not like, oh, you just go into the street and you feel it out. It's like
Yeah.
I give people tools. I think Mark and I have that in common, that we like to give people a framework, so they're not lost when they do their work. And those things, it's kind of like driving. I always tell people, like, at first you're like, oh, I need to put the blinker on, and I need to, like, I have two teenagers that have just learned to drive. It's very mechanical at first, but once
Yeah.
you learn all these tools, then they become part of you, and your creativity, it just opens up. And it's incredible, the transformation that I see in students once they've acquired those tools. But you gotta go through learning the tools first, and getting into first gear and putting the blinker on, that sort of thing.
I love it. Dotan, thank you for joining us. It's always great to have you on the show. We have a lot in common. We love Mammoth. We love, getting out there and finding those stories. And, you have a great approach. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark, for having me on.
We'll have you again. And you guys, please do check out his masterclass and go to his website. Jared will put the link in there. His work is fantastic. I love his stories in the books. It's just, here's one criteria to me for a photographer. When you look at their work and you go, I wish I had taken that, it sort of gets that little piece of jealousy going, like, why didn't I get that photograph? It's, to me, the mark of a really, really good photographer when you feel that way. And I feel that way about his work. Okay, guys, listen. So you got a lot to chew on, that you should chew on about your own projects. You should be in our AYP Plus class if you do want to elevate your photography, because we are doing this where everybody's chosen their own project. We're showing it week to week within the group and getting feedback, learning from that. And that's invaluable. You're not going to get it anywhere else. Throwing it on social media, you're not going to get the feedback that you really need. It's a live group that's very interested in supporting each other, and they're going to say whatever you see is what you say. So Jared will put the link in there. You guys can join us in there. It's really developing into something amazing. Try these things out that he's talking about. This is the important thing. This isn't like a TV show and you go, wow, that was interesting. Advancing your photography means you've got to put it into use. And the only way that you're going to do that is take your camera out, go out and just take one of the things he talked about, like approaching a stranger. Hey, nice hat, Mark. Just start there and see what happens. And then, maybe note down some of the other points he mentioned about his camera settings. Try those things out. Very, very important. Okay, so that's it, right? Okay. Tuesday at 10 a.m., we do have our next AYP Plus class, so you guys can join us for that one. Yes, Jeff, you can join AYP Plus anytime. You can start your project. It doesn't matter. You can start it the day you join. You're right. We're going to be doing this for the summer, so there's plenty of time for you to develop your project. Don't worry about that. You're not going to run out of time here. And we'll welcome you into the class to, pursue your project. I am very interested in seeing people's voices and seeing their work unfold and hopefully advance as we go through it. Okay, so that's coming up on Tuesday, and I have Ed Kashi. If you guys remember Ed Kashi, the amazing Ed Kashi is joining us on June 24th. Put that on your calendar. I'm not sure who's coming on next week. It may be me doing a critique show. It may be something else, but you guys will hear about it. And I think that's about it, Jared. Have I left anything out except to remind you guys to subscribe and enable the bell so you don't miss any of our new shows? Like the video. And we're going to turn this into an audio podcast. Jared doesn't know this yet. He'll be editing it. because it's such good content and it really lends itself to audio. So this is going to be out there on the audio podcast world. Probably, I don't know. How long is it going to take you, Jared? A week or so?
Well, I
maybe?
could probably have it in the next few days here.
Okay, so you guys can listen to it again. Podcasts are cool because you can listen to them in your car or while you're working out or on a walk or whatever you want. So that's gonna we'll let you guys know about that. And of course,
And I know a
this is
few
on
people.
YouTube.
Oh, and I know a few people were asking about Dotan's workflow in SilverX Pro. And if you haven't seen it already, we have another interview with Dotan where he goes into a little bit more about that. So be sure to check that out if you want to see more.
We'll link
on
those
that.
together for you guys so you have his other shows that we've done with him. Okay, I think that's about it. Jared, do we have any other pieces of news, or is that?
Nope, that's all.
All
a
right,
lot for
listen.
people to digest.
We are marching ahead. It's going to be, it's summertime. This is the time to really learn. This is a good time to roll up your sleeves and dive in. And, we'll see you guys on AYP Plus, and we'll see you back here next week. So remember, and say this with me, okay, all you guys around the world, remember to get out and capture your own images of life. Love you guys. I love your creativity. I love seeing you here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.